expected to call the meeting.
I think you, Zan, if you could. I just resumed the recording also, by the way.
I saw that. Okay, I will call this meeting of the Policy, Rules, and Research Committee to order on August 25th at 10 a.m.
Excellent. This is Melissa. I'll take roll call. Zan Ojero.
Present.
Eric Cardella.
Here.
Parasa Chanrami. Celeste Jansen.
Here.
Erica McAlpin. Diana Rojas. Karen Spencer.
Here.
Liz Thorne. All right, that's everything.
I was like, why aren't my notes working? It's because Melissa and I are in the same document. All right, well, I will go ahead and share some information as part of this first agenda item, the legislative update and advocacy discussion. For the record, my name is Cord Bucher, Deputy Director of Youth Development Division. Good morning, everybody. So we, for today's meeting, the last time we met, we were talking generally about some possible directions for the committee to go in. I suspect there was actually some things that I needed to follow up on, which I totally apologize if you recall what they were and want to hold me accountable. I take responsibility for that getting sidetracked. But one of the topics we talked about was just the council's role as an advocacy body, and particularly what that might look like in terms of council involvement in the YDD legislative policy agenda. So I thought I would start by talking about what we know now about the upcoming legislative session in spring 2023. I'll start by talking about what the Youth Development Division currently has going as far as our asks and proposals around legislation. And then we'll talk, of course, about the pretty dramatic change of landscape that we expect in terms of legislative turnover, as well as a new governor coming in. So to start with, YDD legislative updates, we have one legislative concept bill language that we have posed. This is something we've discussed probably in this meeting and also the full council. We've proposed some statutory updates, really primarily adding language in statute about the Youth Development Division. Currently, there's a very, very brief paragraph about the division, and particularly with some of the new grant funds that have come on and questions about grant making and authority on other parts of our work, like compliance monitoring, for example, it seemed like it might be good just to look at the whole thing, fill in where the division is currently doing work, and actually like describe that where it's things that we are doing and will be consistently doing, so that role isn't really something that would be in question. I think when the original division statutes were written, there was a very small unit and really did only function to carry out work that was directed by the council. But now there's a lot of work the division does independently, as well as with the council. Because we've asked for updates, we've also tried to make some improvements to some of the language, just areas where things were just not very clear. I have a draft. I hadn't thought about whether it would be useful to share the LC. I can, but I think that maybe the thing to focus on at the moment is the fact that one of the things we don't know with the change in governor is the fate of legislation that we would like the governor to sponsor on our behalf. On a normal session, we would get this LC drafted and work with the governor's office to ideally have it be sponsored by the governor on our behalf. If it could be redirected to a committee, a legislative committee or a legislator. But generally, we've had one or two bills that we would put together as LCs that the governor would actually drop for us. And we don't know if that will happen. And so that's one of the things we'll talk about is how this LC might make it into being an actual bill on the floor of the legislature this session. But I'm happy if we have time today to open up my screen. There's nothing in there, we're afraid to share. It's, I think, actually some really good cleanup, as well as clarifying what the division does. We have two policy option packages or funding requests that we've put together. One of those is for the Future Ready funds. This is part of the Future Ready money is federal relief funds, ARPA dollars, that can be used through 2026. We would have to make grants before the end of 2024, and those dollars could be spent by grantees by the end of 2026. So when we got the Future Ready legislation passed, it all was money that was put into our budget for the current biennium. So we have $3 million in general fund, which our current Future Ready grants are going to disperse. But we also have $7 million in federal funds. We already have it. We have an agreement with DHS in place that gives us access to this money through that full time period. So now we need to get that money put into our budget. And because it was money given to us for this current biennium, we have to ask to have it carried forward and get the limitation or permission to spend the money. We don't see that as being something that is going to be a problem or a challenge. Higher Education Coordinating Committee is doing the same thing with like $180 million. So we're not carrying nearly as much forward. So we don't see much risk there, but that is really important for us to be able to put that in our budget next biennium and spend it next biennium. There's also a position that is attached to that, and we would be asking for that to also be carried forward. So that's one of our policy option or policy concepts in our package. So the policy option package has two concepts: Future Ready, and the second one is a request for a juvenile crime prevention program analyst. So this would be a position that would focus on grants, particularly on the prevention and justice side of the house. So for folks that I don't know if anyone, I think this actually precedes YDC creation. There used to be a position that functioned under the juvenile crime prevention manager, under Anya's position, that was really focused on grant management and program work. And that position was cut in 2008, as I understand it. So this is to some extent bringing back capacity that we had many years ago. But we see it as meeting a couple of different needs. I mean, one is that we have juvenile crime prevention grants that we make, which Anya, in addition to managing her team, also manages those individual grants. We have Title II federal funds grants, which again, Anya is managing in addition to her managerial role. So it would kind of shift the grant management to someone whose job description really more matches grant management. It creates better bandwidth for Anya to actually do policy work and guide the work of the prevention and justice team. Hopefully it also could I think there's possibility with the creation of the position of other responsibilities and roles being taken on. But that of the two, the policy concept on Future Ready, we feel pretty confident the money's already there. We don't see an issue. Asking for a new position without also receiving new money. So asking for a grant manager to manage grants that we already have. I do see there being a tougher road to that particular our policy concept, making it into our budget. It is, so right now, ODE has put together our agency request budget, and these will be included, and then we'll hear back from the governor's office a little later in the fall about their decision on these requests. I think other things that we expect in the legislative session, I think one to mention is Gresham, the city of Gresham, successfully lobbied for $2 million in funds from the legislature for a Gresham community level intervention program. It's called East Multnomah Outreach Prevention and Intervention Program. It's really focused on youth violence prevention, and they were able to get that in a special session. They got the funding back in December. And that money is only one-time money. It's going to expire at the end of this biennium. But my understanding is Gresham is going to go back to the legislature. Our role, YDD's role, is really just to administer the funds. Everything is designed by Gresham. We do offer them, I think, technical assistance would be accurate. We are requiring the reporting in order to disperse funds. So it's functioning somewhat like our grants might, but the legislation doesn't actually name YDD. It says that ODE got this money, but Gresham made it clear to the legislature they wanted us to administer it. And so that basically is what's happening, that we're working with them, but it's really a Gresham program funded because of Gresham's work. And for that reason, we're not, it's not a policy concept that we are putting forward. We're leaving it to Gresham to pursue this. And then we'll find out, once we know who the new governor is, it's possible that it's something we could actually actively voice support for. Otherwise, we would just provide information such as the reporting and just our assessment of the work as it's being carried out. But it is, I've been working a little bit with them along with Abraham Magana, who is going to manage that grant. And, it's really interesting. They've put together, I think, a really great comprehensive model where the city is coordinating a lot of different community service providers, hosting just dozens and dozens of events. Every weekend they have community events. They're taking activities to the locations that are the hottest, to the apartment complexes where shootings are happening, and really like getting not just outreach workers, but services into the places where they're really needed. So I think that if we were able to, I would be really excited to say it's a good project, but it is also really interesting because it's as far as I know, the first time a single community in Oregon has successfully gotten money to come through the YDC and YDD. I don't know if it's a precedent that we want to fully embrace. I feel like it could be tough to sort of manage a lot of different grants that were given to specific recipients by the legislature, but be that as it may, in this case, Gresham has been pursuing this for a while and they were successful. And I think it actually is addressing a pretty major need in that community. So that's something that we don't know yet where we will sit with it, but we expect it to happen. So it's something we're going to be paying attention to in the legislature. Other bills may emerge. I don't know of anything specific that is going to name the division or council, give us responsibilities, but it's not unusual for us to pop up, in bills sometimes without warning. So that's something we'll know more about once we get closer to the legislative session. So that's basically the update. The other piece that we want to have some discussion about, and just I think we'll talk with the full council about this in a couple of weeks or next week. But it's really just that as we're preparing for the session, we're also preparing for a really different session. And one that for us, the division particularly, could look really different. One of the things that is happening is a big change in legislators. There are a number of seats that will have new electeds in them, regardless of which party wins, because the incumbents are not running again. Excuse me. Some of our past allies and advocates have retired. At least, one of our biggest advocates, Senator Dembro, will be retiring at the end of his term in a couple of years. We do have a couple of legislators who have, done some things on our behalf over the last year or two. So we're trying to, oh yeah, sorry, Brian, I just kind of been rolling right through it. I will let everyone talk. I just want to get through my notes, sorry.
So Brian added in the chat if there are any questions or comments regarding the first part of Gord's update so far.
It looks like I should I'll continue, but I will pause after this next bullet. So we will have to figure out who our new potential advocates could be. I mean, one thing that Brian and I are doing now is identifying the folks who have already shown some interest in our work and support for it, and reaching out so that we can meet now just to remind them of who we are and what we're about, and kind of find out what their priorities are for this session. Even the governor, who we report on Future Ready once a month, has assigned our next report out to the governor has to include what we're doing about our legislative advocates, because this project, as much as it's been really important to her, she is handing it off to us. And she's made it clear that the fate of Future Ready long-term really lies in the hands of the legislature. And then that brings me to the other part, which is that we're in the middle of an election cycle, and there will be one of 3 potential new governors in office in January. And you know, that could have a range of impacts for us. It could, you know, in one case, it might mean that we have a very similar policy agenda. You know, I expect differences no matter who it is, but we might have less profound change in the focus between one versus other candidates. A couple of candidates have talked about their interest in changing leadership at all state agencies or many state agencies. We don't really know what the timeline for something like that is. I think that we are probably, YDD is not the most high profile in terms of agencies that are political lightning rods at this moment. And we're certainly trying not to be. But all that is to say that you know, the actual staffing and leadership, you know, of the division may look different come the legislative session, depending on the outcome of the governor's race and the desire of any governor to keep things the way they are or change them. So, you know, I think we have to acknowledge that, because what that could mean in practical terms for the council is a different role when it comes to advocacy for the priorities of the council and the division. Particularly if it's, you know, it depends on what leadership in the division looks like once we get to the session. But also it could mean that there's increased need for council activity in that place, because we are less able to advocate because of, you know, whatever state of affairs we're in as an agency. I will stop there at the you know, I think at the grim note that I've left us on, open it up for discussion. But I think this is just what we wanted to lay out, is we have some goals. We have a lot of uncertainty. We kind of have identified what our risks are. We don't know really exactly what things will look like come February, but those are the things that are really, you know, the biggest factors.
A tough environment to plan in. But I think that the division seems to have a very strong staff and sense of purpose right now, and hopefully be able to hold on to that. How is Future Ready going?
You know, it's going well. So we have our first round of applications out to reviewers right now. We got 54 applications for this first round of funding. In theory, we probably have enough money for around 20 to be funded. So we have much higher demand for funding than we have in this first round. We're really scrutinizing the applications before sending them to reviewers. With Future Ready, there are just a lot of requirements in terms of reporting to the legislature. We want to make sure that grants can meet. In the past, we've had a lot of situations where grantees, when it comes to actually delivering services, need a lot of technical assistance. Not many projects, but there are some that just need a lot of support. And we really want to minimize the risk of a program that you know, for example, what we've really been looking at are those that say they're doing paid work experience. So we've made it clear we want a wage-based, minimum wage, hourly-based paid work experience for youth, not stipend, not, you know, like it needs to be a formal structured paid experience. And so where applications were not really clear about that, or were implying that they were doing some kind of stipend award, you know, we've given them a chance to clarify and said, you need to be doing these things. It needs to comply with bully workplace regulations. Can you affirm all of this? And so where folks are not able to do that, you know, we're not going to move those forward. There will be an opportunity for folks to, of course, understand why they were not chosen, and you know, we can provide feedback to the applicants that want it before the next round. But we're really trying to make sure we have high quality projects. So that's one of the challenges, just in terms of like, making sure that we take the time to do this, even though we want to move fast, we want to be effective in how we're distributing the funds. The biggest challenge at the moment is hiring. I'm still the future ready analyst until we have a future ready analyst. I won't go into just that process. We have more interviews coming up next week. And I'm hoping that we get someone in place. It is a limited duration position, which I think is part of the challenge. This person, the job itself would exist through the end of next biennium, unless a future legislature says we really want to keep this going and see a lot of value, which is another reason we want really effective programs. We want to be able to show the legislature that this is a really good investment that gets results, that's reaching the youth that should be served, and doing so in a way that everyone can feel really good about. So that's, I think the stakes are high, but I'd say it's going pretty well at the moment.
Good. Good geographic distribution proposal?
Yeah, we're using the regional award process. So we've got applications from 10 of the 11 regions. Kind of disappointed because one of the regions where we didn't get applications, we've actually been doing regional outreach and meetings with programs. So I don't know what went awry there, but we've now got those relationships reestablished. So we're going to try to make sure that we can really strongly encourage applications in the second round. I also wonder if some folks chose not to apply since the money is 1 year funding, and there's been a lot of money coming out through federal relief dollars and other state resources. But we did see applications from from new places that we have done outreach to, so that was good. In terms of distribution, about only 1/3 of the applications are from the metro area, so 2/3 are coming from outside. I think the next, in terms of regions, we have a lot from like the Mid-Willamette Valley and a lot from Southwestern Oregon, which is usually what we see. But we have a few applications from Central Oregon, one from Eastern Oregon that I know of for sure, another that is actually proposing to serve all of the tribes. So it's sort of a pan-tribal nation program run by a statewide organization. So depending on the outcome of reviews, we will see, we'll definitely see those 10 grants in the 10 different regions that are represented, but I'm hoping that we'll see really good geographical distribution overall.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
are there other questions on this? Sorry, on other topics?
I have a question. It's more about recent federal legislation. Do you have any insight into whether more dollars may be coming through, say, from like the Inflation Reduction Act, trying to get youth into sustainable trades or anything like that?
I don't have any information on that. At least I have not heard about anything that would be coming to ODE or YDD, but I'll look into it. I would imagine that usually what happens with that funding is it's going to end up going to HEC, like to the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, because through them it then goes to the workforce boards. With Future Ready, it was really just kind of, I think a few factors got us to the table early on, and that made a big difference, because I would say if Future Ready happened 5 years ago, we would have been probably on the outside looking in. So the standard with any kind of workforce development funding is it usually goes to HEC or possibly to the Employment Department or BULI. But that said, because of this big investment, and I think HEC is really having to scale up for Future Ready. So it's possible if more money is coming, we could get tapped, and someone might say, well, we could use some help with this. I think that we're showing ourselves to be like really capable of partnering. With Future Ready, I think something I should mention that I feel really good about is how well we are working in partnership with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. It has changed. It's like done a 180 from when I started in terms of the communication and collaboration. We meet with them regularly. I've actually, our review panel for our Future Ready position, we have the head of the Future Ready team from HEC on that panel. I mean, we were talking about, sending candidates over to them for they have dozens of positions that we have folks that we thought were good, but didn't suit our position. We're really trying to like share insight, share resources, meeting with their data team. I'm going to be reviewing their grants. So as far as strategic plan stuff goes, I think that's something I would highlight as a real win, is that it's great to see the resources come to YDD, but it's actually given us this opportunity to really strengthen our connection with our partners, with BOLI and with higher education folks.
I'll mention that, there's this, we don't know much about this yet, but there's the White House Talent Pipeline Challenge. I will confess to you, I don't know much about it. I literally got an email from the governor's office yesterday, the day before, saying, hey, one of our policy people is connecting on this. It's a workforce related initiative. And so we're going to learn more about that, I think, next week. And as I'm looking at the 1.5 page document they sent us, it looks like the dollars sort of connected to this are still American Rescue Plan dollars. They're not the latest policy that you referenced, Karen, but there continue to be, I think, some federal level opportunities. And so we'll look into what this talent pipeline challenge is and, see if there's a opportunity for YDD and that YDC. Yeah.
I had a comment in regards to all of this. It just strikes me that when I think about the success of various initiatives over the last 10 years, there are key points where it is really important for councils to get involved in reaching out to the legislature. And it just feels like with all of the changes underfoot right now, that this year would be a really good time in January for us to have council members go to the legislature and do have talking points and say, let me tell you why the YDC resources, the agency is so important. And maybe we do so in partnership with grantees. I know that there is a limit on what it means we do ourselves because of the YDC and the YDD is a state agency and a coordinating council. But I just I know that the success that the HEC has had, I know that the early learning division were because they had really committed champions that were in front of the legislature a lot and helped build connection. And with all of the changes going underway with a new governor, this is such an important time for there to be legislative champions. And I feel like if we're not strategic and planning something, there will be others that are, and we might miss our boat. And it strikes me that having a council member and a grantee that live and work in a particular area connect with a legislator this January, like having some sort of educational lobby day, whatever we can do. I feel like this is the time that we really do need to do that. And it might be really important for us to give folks a heads up at our October meeting that this is something that we want to do maybe in February or whenever we determine COVID related, to pick a day. And I don't even know what that looks like in this post-COVID world, but I think we should talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, Celeste, I was wondering if maybe someone sent you a link to the notes, because that is a perfect articulation of what I was going to go on to. And I think, that's it. I think what we have talked about and wanted to bring to you, the committee, is sort of this notion that we recognize that we've probably been, I think I'm going to work on getting better clarity about the degree to which the council is permitted to advocate, on behalf of the YDC or YDD, because I think what I have noticed in past sessions, like for early learning, for example, when we get into the budget hearings, we'll have like 2 or 3 programs show up, and we'll maybe have a letter. We've had a letter from the council in our last budget cycle, but early learning has like 2 days of testimony. They have like parents show up with their toddlers crawling on them, testifying tearfully about how important early learning programs are for like hours, for days. And that's not happening organically. I just know that is hard to do on purpose. It's impossible for that to happen on accident. And so unfortunately, the person who I think would know the most about how that, 2 of the people who know the most about how that works have left. Early learning has new leadership, and their legislative coordinator recently moved to a new job. But I think we can still find out how they did that and figure out how we might replicate that level of like really actively getting our grantees involved. But I think the council could play a really important role in this. And one idea that you have hit on, Celeste, is council advocacy would be, I think, effective, but combining that with grantees and actually figuring out how we can really build a connection between each of you and at least one program in the community that you live in, so that this becomes something that is more relevance and connection for you, and really like that you could potentially be going in with a grantee and talking about the council, the division, and that grantee's work. That's what's one notion that we wanted to put out there, and it sounds like that's where you're going to some extent, Celeste.
Having youth present would be the gold standard. If we could go in with a youth presenter from one of those local organizations, that's so powerful.
Yeah, my sense is that there would be a lot of willingness. I think one of the things we want to figure out is like how to sort of gauge this to the, bandwidth, capacity, and interest of council members. And it's totally fine if there are some council members who say, I don't want to do this or can't do this. But I guess I'll put this out there, like, is your sense that that the best way for us to support this would be to basically provide a very simple framework for how this might look, and then to sort of make that available, and then to help make the connection, if folks are interested with the grantee?
To my understanding, and this is super limited, who we should ask is Janet Barnes, because Janet knows so much about Salem. But I understand that there's no advocacy, but there is education. So we can conduct a comprehensive education campaign where we match council members with programs and set up appointments. And then I think when I've done this in the past, you want to be able to provide talking points, because that is really helpful. And then for council members that don't have, for legislators that don't have council members in their area, that's a place where maybe staff could join a program. There are always kind of the lobby days where that one organization tries to get everything to be scheduled on that one day. And that is something we could certainly try. But I think too, even if we had a window and we asked programs to come at some point between mid-January and mid-February, getting youth there means that youth have to miss school unless we're able to do it on a day when school's out of session. But there are those days that are already planned. So it would take some coordination, but I think that really understanding the value and the purpose and the why behind the funding and hearing the stories would be really important. even if there's no direct ask. And this, I think that might be what's not possible. The other thing that we could do is partner with an organization like Oregon Ask that does do a lobby day, that is interested in a lot of the same things, and see if we could essentially work with them on a lobby day. I think that they have their own legislative agenda, so I don't know that necessarily would be a good fit, but certainly an education day seems like it would be really good to do. And when I think back to like Dick Alexander and the way that all of the early learning stuff happened, it was really because there was some legislative champions.
So when my first exposure to the council and division's work was, I came for a lobby day that Senator Dimbro, maybe the Senate Workforce Committee at that time, put together. It was a youth workforce lobby day. And I got drafted to drive the POIC bus with like 6 or 8 kids and another staff member to Salem. And we had a big meeting down in the basement. I met Brenda, and she actually, like, 2 of my kids were like totally enamored with Peter Courtney because he came out and gave some like really like, kind of saucy little talk to the kids. And he, we met with our legislator. We met like Lou Frederick, whose district we were in, and I think we met with someone else. But like, Brenda was like, I'll get you a meeting with Senator Courtney. And so we went up and met with him at the end, which everyone was really jazzed about. Although it was a bizarre meeting. He gave us leather drink coasters that were made by prisoners in OSP, which I gave mine to somebody on my team at YDD who was mad they couldn't make it on the trip. But it was a unique experience. It was really good for the kids. It was really great for me. And I'm really curious how that was orchestrated. It seems like a lot of work, but I'm wondering, I'm going to reach out because Celeste, you've kind of got me thinking about this. Like, I'm going to talk to HEC and see if they are planning anything, because Future Ready is like, for us, Future Ready is significant. For them, it's huge. And I'm curious if they are thinking about doing something like this around Future Ready, because that could actually be a good thing for us to piggyback on, because then a council member can educate a legislator about YDC and YDD, and a program can talk about their work and their involvement in Future Ready. So I will try to find out, like, because I think I think one of the results of that was actually the support for Senate Bill 586, which created our upper age range in my job. And Brenda told me that she knew that she wanted to hire me from that first meeting, but she referred to me wearing a hat and a satchel, which I would never wear a hat to the state capitol. Whenever at PYC, you can't wear hats. So I was like, you must have thought I was someone else. Maybe there was someone else you meant to hire, but YDD got me. Nonetheless, yeah,
Hey,
I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to say, I think, and we can check in with Janet or other, you as council members can advocate. Let me be very clear. We as staff can't advocate, but you can sit in court, or somebody, like, tell me if I'm going off the rails here, but we were in DC meeting with our federal delegation. Cord and myself and other staff were educating about our work and the impacts and successes. And Molly Rogers was there saying, I strongly encourage you to support the passage of the JJDPA, Juvenile Justice Delinquency and Prevention Act. And so is it regarding this initiative? I totally agree. Having council members with grantees, or council members on their own, or even a council member and a staff sitting in front of a legislator and saying, more dollars to support community investments, more dollars to support re-engagement. that is, I think, a critical role. And I think the opportunity, Celeste, you and I have talked about, I think we just haven't activated as well in a really intentional way. And Cord and I literally were over the last 2 days talking about that now is the time to get our plan together. And this is a particularly important year, shall we say, right? The legislative session is particularly important given the number of new legislators, turnover in governor, blah, 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 blah. Like, and I think, right, we've been, yeah, I feel like we've been building towards this. So I think we're right on the same page.
I think that along with the legislative session, the other thing that would be important is to have someone from council meet with all of the governor candidates and do a briefing. You know, here's what the YDD is, and what YDC is, and here are the programs that are supported. Here's what it does in your community right now. That would be really a good thing to do. We want any one of them to to know about all the good work.
I think that's a really interesting idea, Sam. Brian, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll try to we'll think about some matchmaking. Who might be the best messenger for each of our candidates. I mean, I think the thing is though, is that I without knowing their platform as well, I feel like there is something that we do or can do that is going to be really meaningful and important. We did meet with when Drazen was Representative Drazen. We met with her, Serena and I did, and talked about our work. I have only spoken with Betsy Johnson once about community engagement, so she may not have a lot of awareness of our work. But I think that there are things we're doing, particularly in the communities that folks are from. We're putting grants in the home communities of all the candidates, and I think that itself is something worth mentioning. So yeah, thank you. Well, it seems like given the time, it would be good to talk a little bit about community engagement. And we kind of, I think these things might weave together as well. One of the things that, so we do not yet have a final schedule. Paul Sell on our team is working on the community engagement stuff. It's mostly in his focus. He's out on the road right now, actually. I think they're up maybe they were heading out to Deschutes County. Is that right, Brian? Anyway, we've got 3 stages to this process. So we started with grantee site visits, which we already do, just meeting with our grantees in person for the first time in a few years. And we've also done some regional outreach, really trying to meet with grantees and other folks out in different parts of the state where we have not visited in a few years, making our way inward. So we started with some trips to Eastern and Southern Oregon, and we're making our way back to the I-5 corridor. And then we're planning in the fall, probably October, November, to have a few public community meetings. That could present another opportunity for council members to attend, to be a part of that. Brian, I think you had sort of had some thoughts about just ways that council could play roles in the community engagement meetings. So I should turn that over to you to talk about. But we wanted to also put this on the radar as another opportunity for council involvement.
Yeah, we need to get a sort of a clear schedule to council members. So that's to come, but I think we'll be doing these kind of community engagement meetings in October and November, about 9 of them, and having council members attend to be introduced and to sort of listen and hear, I think is going to be super important for this actually legislative outreach, right? Like to be able to be there and present and hearing what is happening at a local level. You all have various conversations and relationships in your communities, and I'm sure connected to various issues, yet to take advantage of the those sessions and to be present at those sessions. Again, fly on the wall is probably not exactly the right expression, because we'll probably point you out and be like, there's so-and-so. But I think it will serve as a good kind of opportunity to be aware of and present, current issues. So more to come, but yeah, I think this is kind of we can develop sort of our plan for outreach as a part of the legislative session, or in advance of frankly in advance of the legislative session. But these community meetings are going to be, I think, a critical part of that strategy. And
I agree.
Go.
I agree with Celeste that it would be really important to know what legislative district each one of us is in. I've got some great legislators where I am, or Eric and I both do, I should say, including Speaker Rayfield. So that's always good. I
love that. And perhaps Melissa, we have like a spreadsheet of we have a spreadsheet of everybody's names, and I don't know, Melissa, if we probably have a column for your district, right? Either House or Senate district, but if not, we would love to collect that from you if we don't have it already.
Brian and Cord, this is Eric. Are those 9 planned community engagement, both the dates and the locations, do you expect that those might be available for our upcoming council meeting in 2 weeks? Yeah. Okay, great. I personally think if we have that information to share, that'd be where folks can plug in and plan ahead for October, November.
Definitely, Eric.
Great.
We're working towards that. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to ask a basic question. Is the community engagement, is that going to be physical, face-to-face, and virtual, or all virtual? How is that going to be structured?
We're thinking of them as hybrid, in person and the option to participate virtually.
So I think that for folks, council members who are likely to attend face-to-face, it would be good if we're also thinking about having council members, go and do the educational piece for the new legislators, and maybe remind the long timers about the YDD and YDC, that's all coordinated, because we could end up with a situation where somebody just doesn't have the bandwidth. So for planning purposes, it might be good to have that a little bit mapped out.
I'm trying to just say again, you mean so that say more, Karen.
So if given everybody has limited time, if we're going to ask council members to engage in the community engagement and engage in the education piece in February, I think it would be really good to have mapped out what the asks are. So if we are thinking about, oh, it would be great for you to meet with a certain candidate, letting that person know before they commit to the community engagement. Does that make sense? Sort of prioritize for council members where we think they would be of most value to the YDD in engaging either with candidates, legislators, or the community.
And some people may have bandwidth to do more than one activity.
Yes, they may.
And,
yeah.
And some of us might have an easier time given our roles doing this work.
Yeah, and I would just, what I heard Brian say is I think potentially the community engagement could add some content and some perspective for the legislative outreach and engagement. So I mean, I was thinking of them as both, knowing that I probably don't have the time or the bandwidth, but I appreciate that, Karen. Maybe knowing who some of the identified council members or friends of the council like Janet might be earlier might help us kind of reverse engineer that. But I like the idea of whomever we, believe would be the best face or voice at the legislature, also potentially attending some of those community engagement events, just so they have some perspective. Myself included.
That and getting the legislators to those community engagement sessions, if at all possible.
Yeah, I think
we
with
make
the,
it.
sorry, go ahead, Brian. I mean, one of the things that we're having to balance in the community engagement session is, so the mandate, I guess, for lack of a better term, from the Governor's Racial Justice Council, is this is really meant to be focused on so every agency has to produce a racial equity impact statement to go with their budget. For most agencies, that might mean the structure of your agency budget, maybe changing what you're spending money on, or asking for more money to do certain things. What we proposed and got accepted as our plan was for YDD to engage in a revamp of our community investment grants with community input. To really, it's been almost 10 years since we created the community investment grant through community engagement, and the RJC really wants to see something that happens through real collaboration with communities. And so we said, well, we have, this grant fund that really is, meant to be designed with maximum community input. And so we partially, want to focus the conversation on how we can do a better job with grant making. But I think that it's also possible that we can talk about other topics related to other types of funds that the YDD and YDC distribute, policy issues that folks want to bring to our attention, or things that we want to talk to communities about. But I just figured I should share that one of the goals of this process is to really come back with a more responsive funding model. So when we get into our grant making for next biennium, we do it with like this renewed input from communities.
That's good to know. I think that would not want to lose track of some of the youth re-engagement and workforce work, because I think that that's part of what's going to appeal, and just explaining how the community investment grants complement or support some of that work is going to be important too.
Yeah, well, thanks, Sam. We'll definitely talk about re-engagement and future ready as well. Even though part of the challenge is that there's different rules and different statutes that impact some of our funding. So we have to sort of say, hey, community investments are great because there's almost nothing that says how it has to be. So if folks part of the goal is to hear what's going on. And if community says there is this issue that's emerging and no one is addressing it, and we need resources to do this, that grant is flexible and can be responsive. But we don't want to not have conversations about re-engagement, because this could be an opportunity to talk about re-engagement in a community where they're not receiving our funds, and say, hey, you brought up this issue of all these young people that are leaving school and not going anywhere. We've got funds for that. And so it is also an awareness opportunity for the other things we do, for sure. So I have a list of YDD deliverables. It's tracked it in a place I can find it. Some of these are mine. Some of these my colleagues may also be involved in. So one thing I will try to do is, we have some language we got when we were doing letter writing in a previous session, but we'll get some clear guidance for what the parameters of council advocacy are. I mean, I think the key thing in DC was that because the division receives this federal funding, we can't lobby about the federal funding. But our state advisory group or council does not, is not subject to that, because you're not paid with federal funds. I think that with the state, it's a similar deal where we are employed by the governor, so we have to be permitted by the governor to lobby for something. Whereas with a council or commission, it might work slightly differently. So we can get clarity on that and make sure that everyone knows exactly what they can ask for, or say, or do in this role. Also, I mean, I think this was longer term, but really developing a template and talking points, just kind of helping to give some framework, process, and tools for council members, including how we get you connected with grantees, and how we would maybe figure out which legislator or legislators are most effective for you to talk with. This idea of council outreach to governor candidates is something that I think we'd be really interested in exploring further. So I'll talk with Brian about that. Council legislative district list. Melissa, it may also be good to talk to Abe about this, because if we have council addresses, we can just put it into ArcGIS and map this and get a map overlaid and know which district every council member would fall in for the House and the Senate.
Right. I
And
have a
make
list,
that
but
available.
I love the idea of a map. Just gonna also add that we're at time. So Court, I don't want to check in with everyone. And Karen has also raised her hand to say something.
That's the list. I'll
I
stop there.
I had a quick thought. You were talking about the messaging piece and coming up with some talking points. I remember when we did pre-pandemic the strategic planning session, and we developed that timeline. I don't know if you remember, it was like that huge timeline on the wall. I really felt like there were some impactful moments in that historical piece, and I think that it would be really helpful, particularly for new legislators, to know about that.
I think other than council members, I'm the only staff person who was on this call who was there at the time, and I don't know. I really hope someone took pictures of that, but I have no idea whether we recorded that in any way. I will ask.
Oh,
Do we still have a connection with the facilitators of that process, Melissa? Or is that
Sorry,
contract totally done?
With which process?
The strategic planning process.
I haven't in a while, but we had a
I
great
just wa- I mean-
relationship with them. So
Yeah, they would not probably have kept that stuff. So like Melissa and Brian, we actually created a timeline of the entire history of the division and council and all the things we accomplished.
Was this
And
up
it
at
was, like, written on
PSU?
the
Was
wall.
it that session?
Yeah, I can't remember where it was now, but I remember
PSU.
doing this.
Yeah, I was
PSU?
that was in person
PSU.
at Portland State. Yeah. I remember the meeting. I don't remember the timeline distinctly.
It was a wraparound all around the wall, as
You know what?
Karen said, on butcher block paper. That was, yeah.
Well, we did this. We did it at a staff version of like a staff retreat. But did you write it at the meeting, or did they bring it to the meeting? Like,
It was brought to the meeting. I think it was from your staff meeting.
got it. Okay, yeah. So next time you're in your office, Brian, maybe there's some rolled up butcher paper with the timeline of our history and accomplishments.
I'm totally planning to look
yeah.
between like the filing cabinets and the walls just to see if something.
Well,
passed away.
my guess is that it was documented and it was transposed onto butcher paper. I want to say that we as council members were each to add something on a sticky note that kind of signified where we, our personal
yeah,
kind
okay.
of journey line. But
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought
it's
the timeline was really helpful.
and the history of where we've come from, I think, is the point, right? Of just this is where we come from and what we are, what we do now.
we'll have to look for that. I have to jump to another meeting, and I know we're past time, so we really appreciate all of you being here, and we will get back to you with more about these opportunities for council advocacy in the near future.
Thank you.
Zan, before we adjourn, if you could, even though we don't have any members from the public attending, if you could just address the public comment part of our agenda, that'd be great.
Sure. Let me rearrange some things here. Okay, we have, as we're approaching the end of the meeting, I'd like to make sure that we offer the opportunity for public comment. Not seeing any members of the general public on our Zoom meeting. I'll assume that there is no one available for that comment. And I would like to say that this is a very timely conversation, and that I'm also looking forward to getting to the research component of our conversation once we get this part laid out, because that's one of those wonky things that I'm very into, the data and what we can learn from it. So with that, let's adjourn this meeting at 11:03 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Good to see you, Karen.